Dust coiled in the wind like snakes made of ash, rising from the cracked desert floor as the lone rider approached the town of Smoke Hollow. His horse, a weathered gray gelding with a scar beneath its left eye, moved slow but steady, hooves striking, the dirt with purpose. The man atop the saddle wore a coat the color of dried blood and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded most of his face. Beneath it, his eyes burned, a kind of fury that didn't shout, but simmered like a coal bed waiting to catch. The town was no more than a cluster of buildings leaning into each other like old drunks. A saloon, a general store, a chapel whose steeple pointed at God like an accusation. The rider dismounted in silence, his boots crunching gravel as he stepped into the main street. The town went quiet the moment he did. A poker hand paused mid-deal inside the saloon. A dog slunk away under a porch. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. He wasn't famous, not exactly, but men who'd done violence tend to recognize others cut from the same cloth. The way he moved, like his bones knew where trouble lived, was enough. Inside the saloon, the bartender froze with a rag in one hand and a bottle in the other. Two men at the far table straightened in their seats. The stranger scanned the room, eyes sweeping past the gamblers, the whiskey stink, the aging piano, until they landed on an old woman sitting alone. Thin lips, milky eyes, hands like spiderwebs. She rocked gently in her chair, tapping her cane on the floor. "She sold 'em," someone whispered. The stranger turned. 3 girls, little ones, the voice went on, quiet as a prayer. Sold him for 2 sacks of flour and a half-empty bottle, her own kin. He looked back at the old woman. Her eyes met his. No shame, no fear. Just that slow, relentless tapping. "Who took 'em?" he asked. The room stayed still. "She ain't the only one rotten," a man muttered. "Widow Trent took the girls out west, said she needed help on her ranch, but folks know better." The cowboy's jaw tightened. A tendon in his cheek twitched like a live wire. He stepped toward the old woman. The floorboards groaned under. "His boots, you sold children," he said. "They weren't mine to keep," she rasped, not bothering to lie. "Deadbeat daughter married a drunk, then died herself. I fed those girls for 6 years, no one thanked me." "You sold them," she sneered. "Better than starving. What's it to you, stranger?" He leaned in close enough to see the yellow in her eyes. "I had a sister once. I failed her too, but I didn't trade her for groceries." He left before the air could settle again, swinging back onto his horse and setting his eyes west. Smoke Hollow vanished behind him in the rising dust. The sun was sinking by the time he reached Widow Trent's ranch. It rose like a scab on the horizon. Dozens of cattle penned behind split-rail fences, a large house squatting in the center, like a spider in a web. He didn't knock. He walked through the gate and into the yard, his boots sinking into the dirt like it wanted to keep him. 2 men moved to intercept him. One held a shotgun, the other a coil of rope. Their faces were sunburned and slack-jawed, confident in numbers. He didn't draw. Not yet. He let them get close. "You're trespassing, mister," the one with the rope said. "I'm here for the girls." The men exchanged a look. Shotgun tightened his grip. "They ain't for sale. They already were. Turn around." "I don't turn easy." Then he moved. The revolver cleared leather and cracked once, then twice. The rope man dropped, like a felled tree. Shotgun stumbled back, screaming, hand clutched to a shattered knee. Dust spun, horses reared, doors banged open. He stepped forward, calm as shadow. "I ain't asking again." The front door creaked open and Widow Trent stepped out. She wore black lace and a smile like a knife. Her hair was white and neat, pinned back with silver combs. She didn't look surprised. She looked entertained. Well, she said, descending the porch steps. "A man with manners and bullets. What's your name?" He didn't answer. "You want my girls?" "They're not yours. I fed them, clothed them, better than their mother did." "You didn't buy them to raise." Her lips parted in mock offense. "You judge quick for a stranger. I've seen what folks like you do, how you break them, How you teach them to stop crying. The laughter left her eyes then. You think you can just walk in and take what you want? I'm not asking. She turned. They're in the barn, locked up safe. Try anything and my boys'll turn you into smoke. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked past her, past the porch, past the stables where blood still pooled, under one of the fallen men. Every step was slow, deliberate. He kicked the barn door open. 3 girls huddled in the far corner. The oldest held a pitchfork like it meant something. The middle girl had dried blood on her temple. The youngest blinked at him, then crawled behind her sisters. His heart slammed against his ribs. We ain't going nowhere, the oldest shouted. She said she'd kill us if we tried. He holstered his gun. I'm not her. They didn't move. I don't want anything from you. Not work. Not words. Just to get you far from here. Silence. Then the youngest whispered, You got a funny face. The other 2 turned sharply, but the tension cracked just a little. He stepped closer, slow like approaching a spooked horse. She hurt you? He asked. She locked us in, the middle one said. Didn't feed us yesterday. He pulled a tin of jerky from his coat and tossed it on the ground. Eat first. We ride soon. Outside he heard shouts. More men coming. Horses. Spurs. The ground trembled slightly like thunder warning of a storm. He barred the barn door and turned. We're gonna ride hard. Hold tight and don't look back. The oldest finally nodded. My name is... Doesn't matter, he said. Not yet. They slipped out the back, darting between cattle pens. The gelding waited at the edge of the pasture. He threw the youngest onto the saddle, then the middle, lifting them like bundles of twigs. The oldest scrambled up herself. Gunfire rang behind them. Splinters bit at the fence posts. He fired back, wild but loud, enough to buy time. He vaulted up behind them and spurred the horse hard. They tore through the gate, hooves beating like war drums. The girls screamed, but he shouted over them, Don't stop! Not till the sun's gone. Behind them, Widow Trent shouted curses. Her voice faded with distance, swallowed by the desert. They rode for hours. Dusk painted the sky in red and bruised gold. Coyotes cried out in the canyons. He didn't stop until the stars bled through the sky like pinholes in black cloth. When they finally halted, it was in the hollow of a dried-out creek bed. The horse wheezed foam around its bit. The girls slid off, legs wobbly. One of them threw up in the weeds. He didn't speak. He built a small fire, just enough for light and warmth. Then he sat, back against a stone. The youngest curled beside him. What's your name, mister? He looked up at the stars, then down at the flames. Don't reckon it matters. It does to me, she said. He paused. Then, call me whatever you want. The oldest joined them slowly. She kept her eyes on the fire, voice flat. You gonna sell us too? No. Why not? He didn't answer. Just tossed another twig onto the flame. Sparks danced. You got a family? The middle one asked. I had a sister once. Where is she? Gone. Because I didn't come soon enough. Silence stretched, thick and aching. We're not like her, the oldest said. He nodded. No, but I am. He stood and walked into the dark, listening for riders, for trouble, for the sound of his past catching up. Behind him, the girls whispered, argued quietly over blankets and space. Life, thin and stubborn, was trying to bloom again. He looked at the stars, jaw tight, heart uncertain. They were safe for now, but dawn would bring riders, and worse. He reached for his revolver and kept it close. He wasn't angry anymore. He was ready. The creek bed was still when the first sliver of dawn peeled over the horizon. The cowboy hadn't slept. His eyes, bloodshot and hollow, stayed fixed on the eastern ridge. His revolver lay on his thigh, thumb resting against the hammer, not twitching, not trembling, just patient. The three girls lay curled under a wool blanket beside the dwindling fire. The youngest breathed with little hiccups, the kind that follow too many tears. The middle girl had curled inward, clutching the crust of jerky like it was treasure. The eldest slept with her eyes half open, the pitchfork, still somehow in her possession, beside her. The world was holding its breath, and he knew why. It was the kind of morning that felt borrowed. Borrowed time, borrowed warmth, borrowed peace. He finally stood stiff from hours of watching and quietly began saddling the gelding. The horse snorted once, nostrils flaring, and that was enough. The eldest stirred, bolting upright like a soldier in a battlefield. "Where are we going?" she asked. "South," he said. "Rougher trail, but fewer eyes." "Are they coming?" "Count on it." She didn't ask more, just reached down and shook her sisters awake. The younger two groaned, the youngest clinging to the blanket like it meant safety. He waited, but not long. They rode in silence at first. The terrain grew rockier, the land less forgiving. Scrub brush clawed at their legs, and buzzards circled overhead like they already knew the ending. The girls said little. The middle one, quiet but curious, watched everything, her eyes flicking between cactus blooms and the glint of metal at his belt. The youngest rode pressed against him, half asleep, her tiny fingers clutching the worn fabric of his coat. It was mid-morning when he saw the dust plume. Small, distant, but wrong. He pulled the horse off the trail and dismounted, eyes narrowing. He handed the reins to the oldest. "Take them behind the ridge, stay low, don't run unless you hear shooting." "Who is it?" she asked. "Don't know. That's why I'm not dead yet." She hesitated, then nodded and led her sisters into the brush. He crept forward until he could see the ridge clearly. One rider, alone, moving slow, too slow, like they wanted to be seen. As they neared, he saw the figure wasn't one of Trent's men, not a bounty hunter either. Just a wiry man in preacher's black, with a white collar loose at his throat and dust on every inch of his coat. He rode a mule and his Bible was tied to the saddle horn. The cowboy stepped into the open. "You lost, preacher?" The man reined in his mule, eyes squinting under the sun. "Not lost, sent." By who? By the wind. By worry. By the sheriff in Smoke Hollow who'd rather see girls safe than buried. That surprised him. "I don't believe in accidents," the preacher continued. "Word gets out. One old man saw you leave. Said you looked like a man done carrying guilt on his back, and maybe now he wanted to do something right." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "Sheriff sent you alone?" "He sent me to pray. And to tell you this. Widow Trent's hired more men, Pinkertons maybe. She's spreading coin like wheat in a storm. Word is she doesn't want the girls back, she wants silence." The cowboy nodded. That made sense. "I can't offer much," the preacher said, "but I know these lands. There's a homestead 2 days south. Widow named Mercy. She don't ask questions and she don't let folks go hungry." "You vouch for her?" "She pulled a bullet from my leg once with nothing but whiskey and a kitchen knife. That was enough." The girls reappeared cautiously, the eldest leading again, her chin high but eyes wary. The preacher doffed his hat politely. "Ladies," he said gently, "you've got someone dangerous looking after you." "Looks don't lie," the eldest replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Be careful, all of you. Hell's always 2 days behind in these parts." They left the preacher behind at the edge of a gulch, his mule stubbornly refusing to move. The trail south was cruel. Sharp rocks, sheer drops, switchbacks that made the horse nervous. But the cowboy didn't mind. Every turn, every bend in the rock, was another chance to throw off pursuit. As they rode, the girls began to talk more. The youngest asked 100 questions, where he was from, why he talked so slow, if he'd ever shot a bear. He answered some. Let others float away on the wind. The middle one liked songs. She sang quiet, half-remembered things her mother used to hum. It made his throat ache, but he let her sing. The eldest remained the hardest. She rode just behind him, her eyes always searching the horizon. Once she asked, "You ever killed someone didn't deserve it?" He didn't answer right away. Yes, he said eventually. Did it feel like this? Taking us? He nodded. That's how I know I won't stop this time. That night, they made camp under a shelf of red stone. The wind was cruel, but the rock broke most of it. He cooked beans over the fire and the girls devoured them like wolves. They were asleep fast, huddled in a shared blanket again. He kept watch. Around midnight, a sound pricked his ear like leather creaking. He moved fast, rifle drawn. A man stood 20 feet away, trying not to move. Long coat, clean boots, not ranch folk. Pinkerton. The cowboy raised his rifle. Don't! The man raised his hands. Not here to kill, just scoutin'. Widow wants him back, but not if it costs more men. Tell her it will. I will, but she's got deep pockets. I've got deep graves. The Pinkerton nodded slowly, backed away, and vanished into the dark. Next morning, they rode, again, faster this time. Every ridge felt like an ambush waiting. By dusk, they reached a small creek and followed it upstream. There, nestled between cliffs, stood a humble cabin. A woman stepped out, gray-haired, muscled, with a scar running. From temple to chin, you Mercy? I was. Preacher sent us. She looked at the girls, then at him, then nodded once. Come in. But if you bring trouble to my door, it better die before I do. They stayed the night. The girls bathed for the first time in weeks. Mercy cooked stew and didn't ask names. He sat alone outside staring at the moon. She joined him after a while. They yours? No. But you're bleeding for 'em. I've bled for worse. She studied him. You gonna leave them here? Thinking about it. They'll hate you. He nodded. They'll live, though. He nodded again. Inside, the girls slept safe under quilts that smelled like cedar. He stood in the doorway watching them. I ain't good with endings, he whispered. The eldest opened her eyes. Then don't end it, she said. He didn't answer. Just turned and stepped into the dark, rifle in hand. The fire inside glowed. Behind him, like a lighthouse calling to a ship that had no harbor left. Trouble was coming, he'd meet it on the road. The next morning broke with a silence too deep for peace. Birds didn't sing. The wind didn't whisper. Even the creek beside Mercy's cabin ran slower, like it sensed the tension soaked into the ground. The cowboy had already been awake for hours, leaning against a fence post as the first light scraped over the cliffs. His coat hung loose, shadow hiding most of his face, but his eyes never left the horizon. Mercy approached, carrying a tin mug of coffee that steamed in the crisp morning air. You expecting them today? She asked. They ain't far, and Widow Trent doesn't let go easy. She handed him the mug. I've lived out here 20 years, seen cattle thieves, bounty hunters, rail company thugs. I know what a lasts. Stan smells like. He didn't answer, just took a slow sip, eyes still locked on the trail leading through the pass. Inside, the girls were waking. Mercy had given them better beds than they'd ever known. Wool blankets, soft mattresses, a window that opened to real morning light. The youngest was already humming, rolling her doll in a scrap of cloth like a baby. The middle one clutched the worn Bible the preacher had given her, tracing the words with a fingertip she didn't yet know how to read. The eldest sat on the edge of her bed, watching dust drift in the sunlight like fireflies trapped in daylight. She knew. Before anyone said a word, she knew. Outside, she found him checking the saddle straps on his gelding. They're coming, she said. Yes. You going to stay and fight? He looked at her then, really looked. I shouldn't have brought you this far. Should have left you with someone safer, but I ain't built for halfway measures. She folded her arms. We're not running. That's not your choice. Why not? Because you're still young enough to start over. I'm not. She didn't cry. Didn't blink. You think dying makes you right? I think standing makes me different. She looked past him toward the trail. How many? 3 riders, maybe 4. Then more behind them. And you're going to face them alone? He didn't answer. She turned and walked back inside. Mercy, met her at the door, eyes sharp. "Girl," she said, "you best keep your sisters close today. We're not leaving him." I wasn't offering. Around midday they heard the first echo, hoofbeats bouncing off stone like war drums. Mercy loaded her rifle, moving, with the calm of someone who had counted her last regrets already. The cowboy stood in the center of the clearing, his coat flapping lightly in the wind, gun belt slung low, the revolver gleaming like a promise. The first 3 riders appeared, at the bend, their figures silhouetted by sun and dust. The one in the middle wore a gray suit and a flat-brimmed hat, clean as a banker. He rode like a man used to being obeyed, with one hand resting lazily on the butt of his gun. He reined in. "Heard you took something don't belong to you." The cowboy didn't move. "Heard you work for someone who buys children like cattle." "Big accusation," the rider replied. "Got proof?" 3 of them, sleeping in that house behind me." "Well," the rider said, feigning thought, "the law tends to like paperwork better than stories." "You came for justice?" "No," he said with a smile. "We came for closure." The cowboy's hand twitched near his holster. "Then, let's close it." The moment froze. A hawk screamed above. The wind paused as if uncertain which way to run. Then everything moved at once. The cowboy's revolver cleared leather, barked 3 times. The man in gray slumped, head snapping back, gun still in its holster. One of his men dismounted and returned fire, wild, panicked. Mercy, crouched behind a barrel, put a bullet clean through his shoulder. He dropped, screaming. The last man turned, tail, and vanished down the trail. Silence returned, but it was different now. Not the silence of peace, the silence of blood settling into dust. The cowboy reloaded. "You just painted a target bigger than the sky," Mercy said, standing. "They were scouting. Widow Trent will be next, and we're not ready." "No," he agreed. "We're not." That night, they reinforced the cabin. Mercy laid traps along the trail, wires, nails, broken glass. The girls helped quietly, moving wood and water, fetching ammo. The middle one even tried to sharpen a knife, though she nearly sliced her thumb. The eldest took charge when no one else did, organizing supplies, assigning tasks. The cowboy watched her with quiet respect. She reminded him of someone he couldn't remember clearly anymore. Maybe a sister. Maybe himself. At sunset, they sat around the fire. No one ate. The youngest curled in Mercy's lap, half asleep. The cowboy stared into the flames. "There's no deal to be made," he said. "Trent won't negotiate. She'll burn the place to the ground." "Then we burn first," Mercy said, "not until they see it coming. They'll be here by dawn. Then we meet them in the dark." That night was colder than it should have been. No wind, no stars, just the heavy silence of men preparing for death. The cowboy stood alone outside the cabin, revolver in hand. He heard the door creak behind him. The eldest girl stepped out wrapped in a blanket too big for her shoulders. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "I do. I'm not scared." "You should be." She hesitated, then asked, "If you don't come back, what do we do?" He turned toward her, the firelight catching the scar beneath his eye. "You live. That's the only rule now." She nodded. "You promise?" He looked away. "I don't make promises I can't keep." She didn't cry, just turned and walked back inside. He stood there a while longer, breathing in the cold, the fear, the purpose. Then he stepped into the dark. They came before sunrise. Not quiet, not careful. Trent didn't believe in subtlety anymore. 15 men on horseback, rifles gleaming in the first gold light. They didn't come for negotiation, they came for blood. The cowboy met them halfway, rifle in hand. From behind a boulder he fired once, then again. One rider fell, then another. The horses reared, men shouting. From the cabin, Mercy picked them off one at a time, never missing, her face hard and calm. The girls stayed low, just like they'd been told. Then the cabin exploded. Smoke and fire burst through the roof. One of Trent's men had slipped close and tossed dynamite through the window. Mercy didn't make a sound. The flames devoured everything. The cowboy turned, rage igniting behind his ribs. He charged the line of men alone, firing fast, bullets precise. 3 more dropped. The rest hesitated, some backing up, others frozen. Then a voice rang out. Widow Trent, atop a black horse, face hidden behind a veil. Enough, she screamed. The cowboy stopped. She rode forward slowly, eyes never leaving him. You think this makes you a hero? She asked. You think saving 3 half-wild girls erases what you've done? No, he said, but it gives me a reason not to stop. She drew her pistol, so did he. 2 shots cracked at the same time. Her horse reared, throwing her. She landed hard, unmoving. He stumbled back, a red bloom spreading on his side, dropped to one knee, fired again. Another man fell, then silence. Not because the battle was over, but because no one knew what to do next. He stood somehow, staggered toward the cabin. Smoke poured from the ruins. The youngest girl crawled from the rubble, coughing, crying. He lifted her, barely staying upright. The middle one followed, soot on her face. The eldest was last, limping but whole. They stood together, bruised and broken and alive. The cowboy collapsed, not dead but close. The eldest kneeled beside him. Don't leave. He looked at her, vision swimming. Told you I'm no good with endings. You're not done. He smiled, bloody and tired. Guess not. Behind them, the sky turned gold, the smoke rising like a flag no one could ignore. Widow Trent was dead, her empire broken. But something else had taken root. Fierce, fragile, and just barely beginning. And it wasn't done growing yet. The sky stayed quiet for 2 days after the fire. No riders, no messengers, no vengeance. Just smoke rising from the ruined cabin, the scent of scorched wood thick in the wind. The land had gone still again, but not with peace, with aftermath. Everything Mercy had built now lay in charred heaps, but beneath that ruin 4 souls were still breathing. The cowboy lived, though barely. The bullet had torn through his side, missing bone by inches, but pain was a storm that never let up. The eldest girl stitched the wound herself, hands shaking, jaw clenched so tight she didn't speak for hours after. She didn't cry either, just worked, like she'd already made her mind up that he wouldn't die. Not yet, not with this unfinished. The middle sister found a well in the nearby hills and dragged water back in a cracked jug she'd found among the ashes. She didn't complain once. The youngest, too small to help much, kept near the cowboy's side, wiping sweat from his brow and humming quietly. Her little doll, still half burnt from the fire, lay beside him like a guardian. He drifted, between fever and memory. Faces came and went. A younger version of himself, fists bloodied from a fight he couldn't win. A brother he hadn't spoken to in years, holding a locket meant for someone else. A woman with wild hair and sad eyes, the kind of love that had burned too hot to last, but always his mind returned to now. The girls, Mercy's last look, the feel of his finger on the trigger when Trent's pistol flashed, and the sound that followed, not her scream but the silence when it ended. On the 3rd day he opened his eyes to find the eldest sitting beside him, arms crossed, face drawn, and sleepless. You're still here, he croaked. She didn't look at him. Somebody had to keep your fool self alive. He smiled, but it turned into a cough. How bad? Bad. Widow? Dead. So's most of her crew. The rest scattered. But somebody's gonna come looking. You know that. He, nodded. Do we keep running? She asked. No. Then what? He looked up at the sky. We finish what we started. They buried Mercy on the hill above the wreckage. The grave was shallow, but the stone they laid at her head was carved with care. The middle girl had etched the words with a rusty nail. She fought so we could breathe. That night they didn't speak much. The cowboy, pale and weak, sat near the fire, watching the flames like they might offer answers. The girls leaned against one another, huddled under the same blanket that had carried them from the start. Later, when the stars were high and the wind moved through the trees like a whisper of old ghosts, he finally said, We ride at sunrise. The eldest didn't question him. She simply nodded and began packing. By morning, the gelding was saddled, and they had what little they could salvage strapped tight. Dried meat, a small pouch of coins, a single pistol with 5 bullets. They headed north, not to flee, but to finish the thread that had begun unraveling the moment he'd seen the 3 girls at that auction, bound and silent, betrayed by blood. Smoke Hollow waited for them. It was a mining town turned outlaw haven. Law came second to profit and widow. Trent's influence hadn't yet crumbled there. She'd built it like a fortress, greased palms, bought deputies, secrets whispered between church pews and saloon booths. If there was any part of her left, bank accounts, allies, blood ties, it would be there. The ride took 2 days. The cowboy barely stayed upright in the saddle. Sweat soaked his shirt, his face ashen, but he didn't complain. The girls took turns leading, even the youngest riding alone now, hands small but steady. They weren't the same children who'd been, sold like livestock. Not anymore. Smoke Hollow appeared on the horizon like a shadow crawling out of the land. Dust coated its rooftops, and the air smelled like coal and old sins. They entered at midday, heads down, silent. No one noticed at first. The cowboy directed them to a stable on the edge of town. They left the horses, grabbed their packs, and moved on foot through the alleys behind the buildings. His steps were slow, careful. Every shadow could be a knife. They made for the bank. It sat at the center of town, red brick with iron bars, and a single wooden sign that read, Trent Holdings and Exchange. A man in a bowler hat stood out front, smoking. Another paced near the door. Lily. Cowboy turned to the girls. This is it. What's inside? The eldest asked. Records, money, maybe names. If we burn her roots, nothing grows back. I'll go in with you, she said. He paused. You sure? I was sure the day I took that pitchfork. They stepped through the bank's front doors, slow and deliberate. The air inside was cold, clean, too quiet. A teller glanced up, startled. Help you? We're here for a withdrawal, the cowboy said. The man at the vault turned. His eyes went wide. Get out now, the teller barked, reaching under the counter. The cowboy was faster. His revolver barked once. The wood behind the teller's hand shattered. Everyone froze. Open the back room, he ordered. The guard by. The vault moved, hands trembling. He unlocked the iron door and backed away. The eldest entered first. Inside was a desk, a filing cabinet, and a ledger thick with dust. The cowboy limped in after her. He grabbed the ledger and began flipping pages. Trent's whole network, payments, shipments, bribes, was there in black ink. Evidence. Footsteps thundered outside. Time's up, she said. He grabbed the ledger, stuffed it into his coat, and tossed the lantern from the desk onto the floor. Oil splashed. The match struck. The fire caught fast. They burst through the front door as smoke billowed behind them. The 2 men outside opened fire. The eldest shoved him down, drew her pistol, and fired twice. 1 man fell. The other ran. The middle sister waited across the street, a horse ready. The cowboy swung up with effort, pulling the eldest up behind him. The younger 2 climbed onto the second horse. Gunfire cracked behind them as they rode hard out of town. Smoke rose behind them like a funeral pyre. The ledger was safe. Names exposed. Trent's legacy, gone. They didn't stop until dusk. When they finally dismounted, the cowboy collapsed. Not from blood loss, this time from relief. You all right? The eldest asked, kneeling. He nodded. We did it. So what now? He looked at her, eyes clear for the first time in days. Now you live free. You're not staying. I don't belong anywhere long. She didn't argue, just looked down, then hugged him tight. Then don't die out there. I'll try. The girls watched him ride off at sunrise, coat whipping in the wind, his silhouette shrinking against the vast desert sky. He didn't look back. But something had changed. The West was cruel, yes. But somewhere between smoke and blood, they'd carved a space of their own, a tiny defiant piece of justice. And for the first time in a Long time the world felt just a little more honest, a little more theirs.